Before we start this session, I'd like to address the obvious. My name isn't and never was Sam nor Max. The reason I was called by either of these names was that at first everyone knew me by the character Sam, who was a skeleton. That was a carbon copy of Sans the skeleton, except that he wore a blue wig. Max was a nickname closest to my real name, and as a bonus, it was also unisex. Soon after a while, everyone called me by Sam, and those who knew me a little better would call me Max. I'm not upset with either names because during the time I was called Sam/Max was when I was going through my transitional phase. Most of you should know what I'm referring to, right? I wasn't comfortable with my female-given body and tried to play the role of a male. During this point, I was quote-unquote dating Streamline Workshop, and for the sake of this video, I'll be calling her Iris. Wait, did I air quote just now? So instead of calling me Sam or Max, the possible predator, how about you call me Lucille or Lou instead? Calling someone by a dead name isn't very polite and, quite frankly, embarrassing. Which brings me to my first argument, or would it be more of a statement? I'm not exactly arguing with anyone right now. Would this be considered presenting my thoughts on the current topic? Anyway, the continuous suspicions on why I changed my username and profile picture. Sadly, I can't say anything on the matter because if I told you I was planning on changing it before the situation started, you wouldn't believe me, right? I can only present this to you. I was planning, or at the very least thinking about changing my username on all of my social media accounts to Hopeful Lucille on the 19th. Iris's video came out a day after. But again, take what you will with a cup of salt. If I was trying to make it easier for me to run and hide, then wouldn't it have been best if I hid my channel and deleted my online presence entirely? And she has even provided a link to my channel in the description of her video. So even if I were to change my username, it wouldn't change the fact that she has easily given anyone access to find my channel. I suppose that's all I have to say about this matter. Defending myself leaves a bad taste in my mouth. But I guess I'll have to do what I can with what I have. And another thing I'd like to mention while I'm clearing up misinformation is... Can you see something wrong with these comments? Should I make it easier for you? Very well. When I met Iris, she was the age of 15, right? Now I'm going to give you terms that I could be classified under. Pedophile, h0peful, and h0pful. Huh? You didn't know about these terms? You should have probably looked them up before calling me a child predator. Which one did you pick? I hope you used Google to your advantage because the correct term I should be called in this case would be a h0pful. Iris was aged 15 when both of us were romantically attracted to one another. But unfortunately, I wouldn't call myself an h0pful, nor a h0pfil, or even a pedophile. Do you want to know why? The answer shouldn't surprise you. For the terms I've used, their general description is being attracted to a certain age group, correct? Pedophilia is defined as a recurrent and intense sexual arousing fantasies, sexual urges, or behaviors involving sexual activity with a prepubescent child or children, typically those under the age of 13, right? h0pephilia is a strong, persistent sexual interest by adults in pubescent children who are in early adolescence, typically ages 11 to 14. h0pephilia is the primary sexual interest in mid to late adolescence, generally ages 15 to 19. But since we're talking about philias to certain age groups, why don't I bring one more philia into the mix as my next argument? Teleophile, a person who is sexually attracted to adults. It's only fair that I call Iris a teleophile because she was attracted to an adult. But I have a feeling that bringing this up won't make the situation any easier, right? Well, I'll let it slide for now. Phew. I think I've said enough Google research. Oh right, I never gave you the answer either. Well, perhaps I'll tell you some other time. Or maybe never at all, since it's not that surprising. Now then, you're probably wanting me to talk about my side of the story, correct? Unfortunately, it won't be that easy, since you'll most likely have to take everything I say with a pint of salt. You see, my previous account is deleted. The screenshot Iris has provided should be an obvious indication that whatever I say now can't be fully proven because of the lost account and its contents. But keep in mind, would I lie in a situation like this? Now I can't give you my exact word for words because of my deteriorating memory span, but why don't we do the obvious and start from the beginning, from when I first met Iris. I can't give you the approximate date, but we were both introduced to one another by a mutual friend at the time. I didn't think I'd be invited into an online family where I was the one playing the role of dad, meanwhile Iris was playing the role of mom. It wasn't an immediate attraction since I unfortunately knew that she was underage. However, it was her that initiated the crush-like behavior. But hearing that doesn't change my situation, does it? Things slowly began to progress with the both of us. I'm unsure of who confessed their feelings first since that part of me is still hazy. But there is a keynote here. Neither of us officially dated. But again, that doesn't change my situation, huh? We were in what I'll call the honeymoon phase. We acknowledged our feelings for one another, but we never officially gave consent that we were dating because I knew she was underage. Unfortunately, the law in Canada is lenient with the age of consent. We both agreed that we date when she turned the age of 16, but that never happened either. We continued to act like a typical couple. I called her by the wife nickname and she called me by husband or honey or some other variation. Eventually, Iris told me in a personal environment that she wasn't looking for a relationship and wanted to focus on herself, her school, the whole spiel. I agreed to this. Neither of us were in a relationship from before or then on. But you can't take my word for it now, can you? Think back to what I said before. My account is deleted, right? So take everything I say with a barrel of salt. But that doesn't excuse my behavior and how I spoke to her. Rereading the screenshots she provided, it makes my skin crawl to think that I did something as gaudy as this. It's almost like I was asking for the situation to happen. Speaking of this situation, it reminds me of a time when I had a roleplay server, and a certain someone tried to publicly out me, just like what's happening now. I don't have the exact screenshot anymore, unfortunately, but it was a close friend of Iris asking where she was. Not the exact words, but where is flat chest, and I responded with, wife, or something of the sort. This person used that screenshot as a way to prove that I, if I remember correctly, sexually harassed Iris. But I did no such thing. Truth be told, I was your typical adult, thinking typical adult things and drawing typical adult things. I said typical so much that it's making my brain all fuzzy. Now that I've spoken of what I can remember during our first meeting, and somewhat beyond that, I like to bring up the times we've physically seen each other. Unfortunately, my physical appearance doesn't look like that of a 22-year-old. I'm shorter than Iris is, and I act younger than I'm supposed to be. Our first meeting was when both of us were in our honeymoon phase. Not dating, yet we held hands, both making sure that the other was comfortable with the act. We also hugged and gave each other kisses on the cheek. There are photos of our time together, but for the sake of Iris, I won't release these images unless permitted by her. However, during our second time meeting, it was after she had declared to me that she didn't want a relationship. I kept my distance from her this time around. The only time I ever physically touched her was when I rested my head on her shoulder. I think it was because I was tired, but I can't be too certain about this either. And after that came the severance. But that's another story for another time. I'll summarize it for you just for the sake of context. I called it the severance because I was disconnecting myself from the online world, basically cutting myself out due to personal conflicts. Of course, what I did doesn't excuse anything whatsoever. I left everyone for no apparent reason other than I saw myself as toxic and wanted to get away before I gravely hurt someone. But it did plenty of emotional and probably psychological damage to everyone that I called friends. I'm not exactly a good person, but who is? And don't answer that in the comments, it's a rhetorical question. For a couple of months I handed over ownership of my server to Rory, my younger sister, but much to my dismay, it only caused internal chaos because of the way she was running it, so to speak. But again, this is another story for another time. How about we briefly change the topic to the comments I received during the first couple of hours she uploaded her video. This comment I received was by my younger sister, Rory, the same person who was running my previous server during my disappearance until its inevitable end. So before you try to use this as evidence for sexual misconduct to a minor, please don't. And I'm begging that you do not attempt to harass me or her by saying this is incest. If you care about minors so much, then leave my sister alone, okay? And because there's too many of you to properly name, I'll just show as many screenshots as I can of what I'll be addressing next. Did you catch the theme in the comments? It shouldn't be that hard to figure out what it is, right? Well, if you don't know what it is, allow me to spell it out for you. Therapy. As much as I want to appreciate your concern for my well-being, you're not concerned about specifically me, are you? I don't blame any of you. What with the way I spoke to Iris, the way that I romanticized the idea that a 15 and a 20-year-old could be together, it's not something a person with a sane mind would say, right? However, telling me to get therapy isn't helping in the way you think it is. But even if I were to get therapy, it wouldn't help me either. You're treating therapy as if it were akin to curing mental illness. It's almost sickening. While I do believe it's a humane way to treat people with sexual interactions to minors, it wouldn't help me in this case. And it's because of that answer. Which brings me to my next topic, grooming. Unfortunately, I can't say whether or not I have groomed Iris because it wasn't my intention to groom her. I wasn't getting anything out of it, unless you want to say that me romancing a 15-year-old was the motive, or that I simply wanted emotional support. I understand that grooming doesn't necessarily have to be explicit to sexual reasons. I'll be taking notes from this website in particular. Stage 1. Targeting the victim. I'm sorry to say this, but I wasn't targeting anyone in particular. Stage 2. Gaining the victim's trust. I suppose you can see it this way, as I was friends and trying to be more than that with her. Stage 3. Filling a need. There was no need that I had to fill. Unless you want to argue that the need I was feeling was love or emotional support, then by all means, let's use that. Stage 4 and 5 are both incorrect. I wasn't trying to isolate Iris, and neither was I trying to sexualize the relationship. Stage 6 kind of bewilders me. Maintaining control. I don't think I was using secrecy or blame to keep Iris under my thumb. Unless you want to argue that I was subconsciously trying to keep her from accepting the truth that she was a minor in the situation and thus making our interactions obviously illegal, but keeping it in secrecy because we both believed it was nothing but love. I've said so much already, it feels like I haven't gotten anywhere. But there is something I wanted to briefly mention. It's about my first comment while the situation was gaining traction. I was currently busy at the time this situation started to garner attention towards my channel. People were claiming that they were not attacking me, but aggressively giving me advice and calling me out about how I supposedly groomed Iris. My response wasn't well thought of as it was spur of the moment, but my statement still stands. Think of it like this. When you see someone physically being harassed, whether it is sexual or not, what would you do? You would immediately call the police and not get involved personally, right? As any normal human would do. You saw me as a potential predator and thus start to act on your own accord, telling me rather aggressively that I should seek help and admit to my wrongdoings. But there's something wrong here. You didn't call the police. You actively went out of your way to expose me for the things I have supposedly done or am doing. But I'm skeptical if there will be police involvement. Not because I don't think I got away with it or that Iris doesn't deserve to be given proper justice, but because... No, I shouldn't talk about myself since you'd all think it'd be manipulative of me to bring up my past experiences, right? This video, this whole situation, it's about Streamline Workshop, right? And while we're speaking about Iris, let's go back to a previous topic that mentioned the severance. The time I disconnected myself entirely from the internet only to come back due to the harassment of a minor, my sister. But you probably didn't want to hear the last part, right? When I returned, it wasn't surprising to have mixed feelings about how everyone felt. Truthfully, I'm still in awe that I haven't spoken about it properly with the right people. But that's because they've made it well aware that they want nothing to do with me. I can't say for sure how Iris felt during this message or my quote-unquote revival. I could only assume that she truly didn't want me to come back, seeing how I left everyone believing that I was the worst, most awful, most toxic person. And it turned out to be true, especially when I came back. My previous friends all despised me because they must have thought my disappearance was because I hated them all, and that I was looking for a way out. Or something like that. I can't speak for them. I'm sure they have plenty to say about me, that I create or actively pursue drama, or that I control or manipulate others, or maybe I'm needy or that I use others to meet those needs, or perhaps I'm extremely critical of myself or others, or that I get easily jealous or envious of others, or that I complain about my bad fortune and others' good fortune, or maybe I abuse of substances and self-harm, or that I'm unwilling to seek help from loved ones or a therapist. Huh? Did I just list off the symptoms of a toxic person? But anyway, did it give her the right to say this comment? Perhaps. However, she should have not said anything to begin with. Giving me a happy birthday beforehand, this was kind of unnecessary. Now then, it's finally time I talk about the Google Drive she provided and its contents. I won't be going into the DMs just yet, but instead looking over the smaller folders first, starting with Twitter. However, I won't be talking about it myself, but instead reading a comment that someone else had made on her community post. I actually took the time to look at each one of the DMs. I immediately slipped over some parts because you and Sam were just talking to each other. Now I will say it's none of my business on that part. You two meeting and both of you talking with DMs. However, I want to say, and this is not to defend Sam, since I have no idea who they are, but fictional characters are not a form of evidence to prove that someone is a pedophile. I'm sorry. If you have more evidence of predatory behavior or both of you omitting each other's ages, please feel free to provide them. However, this is a form of criticism when providing evidence. Don't say someone's a pedophile because they find a fictional character attractive. Fictional characters do not give consent. I understand that you are currently going through things after finding out you were or are groomed, but please take the time to calm down to research your evidence over, as you are showing your audience a means of misinforming others on how to spot a pedophile. The art community is not a stranger to aging up characters or making them sexy or drawing them lewd. If that was the case, then the majority of the art community would have been pedophiles then. The only ones able to state it's wrong to make fan art like this are the creators of the show. Again, I'm not saying this to downplay or ignore if you have been groomed or not. It is a form of criticism. It's understandable to make these mistakes since you are currently emotional, but please be careful what you tell your audience next time. The fictional character point was an added point. The thing we should be focusing on is that Sam was dating a minor, a 15-year-old who just turned 16. Sam's an adult. That's predatory behavior. That is exactly what this post should be focusing on. Adding the point of fictional characters being aged up, however, is not necessary compared to the predatory behavior Sam displayed to Stream, who is a real person. That is what Stream herself should focus on, not the unnecessary details. That is my point. I hold nothing against her, but the fictional character aged up thing was a necessary detail and it can misinform her audience on how to go about the situation. And because I'm generous, I'll show the images in question. I don't have anything to say. The commenter said it best. Next are the group chats. I'm not sure what you want me to say about these chats. Originally, it was banter between a small group of friends, but I suppose it could look incriminating on my end because I was in a group of minors. And here are the IRL images provided. Here's a fun fact for the second picture in question. There was a third party involved who took the photo for us. Sorry, but I can't give you any more information, otherwise there'll be legal actions involved. And now for the moment you've been waiting for, the DMs in question. I'll chime in when I have something to say on the image in question. It should be fine for me to talk about this since she released this information for anyone to see, but she was the first to talk about where she lived. Known internet logic that you should never give out your information to anyone, even if they say they live in the same place as you. What I've currently been reading to you seems fairly normal, right? However, you could argue that this was my grooming tactic. I was trying to get Iris to trust me so that I could lull her into a false sense of security. But sadly, that wasn't the case, and I'll explain why soon. But let's keep reading, shall we? I'd like to talk about this for a moment. This is when I began to trust her, telling her the reason why I don't date anymore because of my fear of abandonment. Both of these people in question have been renamed Pyro and Batter, so keep that in mind while we continue forward, okay? I'll try to give a bit of context with what memory I have of the situation. I don't remember what Fano and I spoke about, but it must have been if I had liked anybody currently. I had told her I already liked someone. My feelings for that person have since changed, but I still care about them a great bunch. This person will be mentioned later on. But here's something you need to note. Iris was the one that admitted she liked me. True, she didn't admit it, but she never denied it either. I then admit that I had fallen for her and that the other person was already in a relationship. And I can't believe I spoke like this. You ever look back at how you used to be as a person and feel yourself wanting to erase that part of you forever? Iris said that she was banned from dating until university due to having strict parents. Loaf. Reminds me of home at Mom's. Note that she has blurred the names for privacy reasons. How thoughtful of her. Looking back at it now, my transitional phase must have been caused because I believed that men were strong enough to keep themselves and those they love safe from harm. And that's what I wanted for my sisters, for them to be safe. Moving on. If I remember correctly, at the time I was 20 years old, so my trigger joke was said because I probably knew that I was walking on thin ice, talking to someone underage at the time. I understand that she wanted to give as much evidence of my supposed grooming, but this was something I hadn't expected to show up. I will briefly talk about it since it's obviously available for everyone to see. Sometime during or after New Year's, I had taken a hiatus due to an incident that resulted in a family member being stabbed, thus resulting him being taken to the hospital and the police were inevitably called. I cannot talk about it any further than that. My memory is a little hazy, but I do remember getting a referral for a therapist. Sadly, not because I was romantically interested in a minor at the time, but because I was dealing with other mental issues. That's it. I don't remember what caused this conversation, but we'll be looking at my response at the bottom. I like being able to listen to your problems and try to help you out. If we were ever to date one day, then I want to make sure you can trust me then, just as you do now. This is the first publicly available instance where I implicate that we are not dating at the time and that we would date someday. That day would never arrive. Oh, you want me to explain why I said something like this? Sorry, I can't give you an answer. I could say I wasn't in the right frame of mind when I brought up self-harming, but that doesn't excuse my actions, now does it? This is false! I can proudly say that I can love another more than my own life. Oops, spur of the moment. My apologies. I guess there were other nicknames I gave her, huh? I completely forgot about that. It was wrong of me to openly talk about my current problems like this. After all, it should have been private matters such as my mom being arrested, my dad likely had cancer, and such. She was just a teenager in this situation. There wasn't anything she could do but give me emotional support. You do the same too, right? The truth of Sam was a man named Daniel. We've known each other for a long while, and we've both had our personal qualms. He would tell anyone who would listen to things about who we both were as people and our relationship with each other. Things that were bad to openly talk about for the both of us. And when it came back to Discord, he was the one who offered me his account since he thought it wasn't necessary for him to have anymore. The deleted account was me at the time. The Max and Cheese was previously Daniel's account but now has since been given ownership to me. I'm sorry if I don't remember who Naomi or the son in question is, but this is the second instance that would implicate that neither of us were dating at the time, as the son was preparing me to be your boyfriend. Huh? Oh, sorry. I got nothing. Let's add another tally to the implications that we were never dating. And another. What a moron this person was. Oh, this is me. Moving on. Another tally? Another tally. This was incredibly rude of me, and I'm surprised that Iris didn't blur out the person I was talking about. As his best friend, I am personally offended due to the fact that she made this public. My best friend has mental issues, just like any other normal person, and ranting about him to someone who barely knew him was starting to paint him in a bad light. To my best friend, if he's watching, I'm sorry for talking about you like this. As your friend, I should have kept this information private between us, so I hope you can forgive me. I see you still haven't blurred out his nickname. This is truly sickening. Iris, if you're watching this, and I know you will be, you and everyone else can accuse me of being a child predator, a supposed groomer. But you had no right to be giving people private and traumatizing information like this. I was trying not to speak about myself whatsoever in this video, because otherwise, everyone would accuse me of playing the victim card. But because you put something like this, then you give me no choice but to speak about it. I don't care how much you dehumanize me by giving people our private DMs, attempting to show everyone my alleged grooming behavior. But this is a new low, even for someone like yourself. You presented this, and I will gladly read it for all. I've said all that I wanted to on this matter. Let's continue. This was when Iris admitted that she did not want to be in a relationship anymore, although she was never in one to begin with. But nonetheless, I accepted her decision, telling her that I'd support her, because that's what any romantic interest, now turned hopeless crush, would do, right? I still listen to audios. I even make sure to support the voice artists to do them. Moving on. Still not blurring names, are you? As an adult talking to a minor at the time about things like this, I can safely say that I too am disgusted with how seemingly easy it was to talk about this. No privacy for the innocent, I see. I've had to wait a considerable amount of time for the evidence to be uploaded. But now that we've gone through everything, it isn't up to me whether or not I should say what I said was right or wrong. You wouldn't believe me anyway if I said I wasn't trying to purposely groom her, now would you? There's another comment you want me to see. I must have glossed this over because they too were telling me to get therapy, but had I looked at it a little longer, they've stated that this was obviously caused by trauma. Very well. This will be the last time I ever talk about myself in this sense. What I did, or what I supposedly did, was not caused by trauma. At least, that's what I believe. The things that have happened to me throughout my life should not have caused something like this to happen. That's all I'm going to say. Truthfully, this isn't the first time I've been publicly called out, but it wasn't because I was a predator. Unless you want to call a 10-year-old a pedophile, or with the term buteliophile in this case. But that was in the past, right? Whatever happened to me doesn't matter in this case. Not anymore. Because nobody would believe me and continue to dehumanize me. There's so much more I want to talk about, but unfortunately, if I lose my composure or show signs of snapping or weakness, you'll probably think that you've won, right? True, that's a childish way of seeing this, like a game of who wins or loses. But I, as an adult, cannot excuse my actions, nor can I make excuses for them, saying that I wasn't in the right frame of mind, or blaming my mental illnesses, or even blaming Iris for what I've said. Nobody here is to blame but myself, right? I should take full responsibility for what I've done. But what does that mean to you? What would I have to do to accept responsibility? Deleting my channel? Deleting my social medias? Deleting my online presence? Or maybe getting locked in jail, serve my time, get therapy, and be admitted to a psych ward? Or perhaps you'd rather want me to take my own life as atonement. But that doesn't sound fair, now does it? And you're probably expecting me to get on my knees and grovel, right? To apologize to Iris for the things I've supposedly done to her. Would that give her and everyone else, including you, the closure that you wanted? But what would me apologizing accomplish? Nonetheless, if you want me to apologize, I will. Unless you don't want to hear me half-ass it because I was forced to due to mob mentality in the comments. Which I'd like to say is rather unprofessional for every party here. Iris created a video to talk about her experience with a quote-unquote predator, which meant she knew what she was getting herself into, correct? Anyway, she openly explains and admits that she could most likely have been groomed by me, saying that she believed it was her fault because her parents conditioned her to believe that every problem in her life was all on her. People publicly expressing that she shouldn't defend the 20-year-old she was dating at the time, but had mutual feelings for. And yes, in her video she was indecisive to give information on who supposedly groomed her, but she did so anyway, even providing a link in the description. She stated, "While I do realize this would make it more accessible for people to attack her, not giving it out would completely defeat the purpose of me making this video because no one would know who I'm talking about. And while yes, it is true because of how easy it was to find me with the link provided, people still came to my channel. You can say in your comment that you didn't come out to attack me, but that's not entirely true. You commenting and saying things like 'get help' is an attack on my person. You're attacking me because you believe that my mental health is a risk for everyone. And another thing she stated, I don't want anyone to go out to witch hunt or harass her. I would just like people to stay away if it's possible. And I'm honestly not surprised to see that nobody listened to her. You listened to the part where she was supposedly groomed, but that last bit just didn't register with you, did it? She wanted you to stay away from me if I was a potential predator, and yet you're still all here in my comments denying that you're attacking me. I'd like to end this part with one more thing. She even admitted that what she was saying could easily ruin someone's life. It's safe to say that my life has already been ruined before. You're fine, Iris. The only thing keeping me alive is the hope I feel thanks to the few people who continue to trust and support me, including him. So no, I don't think I should apologize. Not because I don't want to or that I should, but because I never intended for something like this to happen. But that's probably something you didn't want to hear from me, right? Then allow me to try and apologize. I'm sorry that I was attracted to you as a person and not because of your age. That I loved and worried about your well-being as a romantic interest should. I'm sorry that I supposedly groomed and manipulated you into keeping quiet about our illegal romantic interactions. That I subjected you to the traumatizing paragraphs of my horrid romantic writing. Now that I'm truly sorry for. Just thinking about the things I said and the way I used emotes made my stomach churn. Oh, right, I'm getting off topic. I'm sorry that so many people had to attack my person, calling me a pedophile and a child predator, when it should be common knowledge that you were not a child, but a growing adolescent. I'm sorry that I didn't listen to you when you said not to witch hunt or harass me, and to stay away from me. But you can't blame them, right? You have a young fan base, and it's not uncommon to see a kid go against what someone says. Oh, but there were a few mentions of a commenter being an adult. Then shouldn't they know better too, and respect the wishes of the minor in question? Which, by the way, if you were a grown adult, you wouldn't be talking like this. That's quite immature of you, and people were telling me to be the adult in the situation. I'm sorry that innocent bystanders had to be harassed by impatient people. And I'm sorry that you had to bring up my past trauma to expose me as a child predator. Whew. Does everyone feel a little better now? I would hope not. What I said goes against what you wanted me to originally say, right? It's upsetting that things had to end up this way. However, I cannot be truly upset with any of it. If people believe that attacking me, ridiculing me, and advising that I get therapy will help the situation in any way, shape, or form, then so be it. If it makes you all happy or think that you're removing the despair by the roots before it grows into something potentially dangerous, then, by all means, say whatever you want about me. Everything that happens on the internet stays on the internet forever, right? Then I'll continue to keep my head up high and look for a better future, a brighter hope, if it means this whole situation will eventually die down and all parties have been satiated. Before I end the video, for real this time, I'd like to clarify something. You've probably been waiting for me to say this since the beginning, that answer I was talking about. You all believe that I'm attracted to a certain age group, right? But that's not true in my case. I'll be using him as a brief example. I won't be naming him since you'd all probably start to harass or warn him that I'm a possible child predator. But even so, I know he'd understand my point of view. He's the same age as me. Surprising, I know. But would that make me a teleophile? I can't believe I had to bring that up again. The truth is, I didn't like or love Iris because she was a minor. It was because I genuinely liked her as a person. She's the type of person to give rather than to take. She always put everyone else's needs in front of hers and kept her problems to herself because she believed it was her fault and that she was the only person who could take responsibility for her own problems. But I shouldn't be talking about her like that anymore. We're no longer friends. I could say it was in the past, but that's not fair to say for myself either. And now that I have him to support me, along with the others, with him and them around, I know I'll be fine, because I love him as a person, and not because of his age. It's incredibly childish and a one-track way of thinking, don't you think? I'm one to speak. But thank you for taking the time to listen. I leave it up to you to come up with your own conclusion. Hope. A fair given life. despair, a loss given strife. To meet them both could be folly, or that of a great ecstasy.